now. All right, for the audience that doesn't know who you are and what you did and what your career was, please feel free to introduce yourself.
My name is Anthony Watson. I'm a retired agent with Homeland Security Investigations. I started my career in the U.S. Navy, spent 4 years in the Navy, and when I got out, I went and worked with U.S. Immigration Naturalization Service under Department of Justice as a border inspector. At the time, it was split between customs and immigration at the border. I wore the white shirt. I interviewed everybody and for admission in the United States. After doing that job at various locations, after about 10 years, I became a special agent with immigration, and you had to bust back from your current rank all the way down to a trainee rank. Um, there was a reason behind that. I can get into that later. And I was an INS special agent for 5 years or so. And then Department of Homeland Security came along, which abolished immigration and abolished U.S. Customs and combined them all into one organization. And the special agents for U.S. Customs and U.S. Immigration, they put together under Homeland Security investigations. And I stayed with that till my career was over with. In 2019, end of 2019, I retired. That's a lot to unpack.
Yeah. So, what's it called? When you're doing, because you said you did border protection, correct?
Yes.
That was the main root of your career. Okay.
Well,
so what is
it has to be because for Title 19 authority, all of our cases had to be border centric. People don't really realize that, like drugs, when it comes to drugs, cocaine is not a domestic product. It has to come from a foreign country. So that puts it right exactly in the wheelhouse of U.S. customs laws in Title 19, which is kind of weird. But okay, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, you're fine. You're fine. No, that's so with that being said, though, when you're doing that as a job, like what did you learn from being in border protection, like about people?
About people, everybody is different. Um, a lot of officers, when they're young, I was taught when I first came on as a trainee, I had the opportunity of working with some gentlemen who had been in the service for a long time. When I started, I mean, they were showing me pictures of themselves on horseback in the U.S. Border Patrol. I mean, this was not when it was like an option to be on horseback in the Border Patrol. It was like that was the only way you got around was on horseback. And they taught me to be compassionate towards people and respect other people as much as you can. When they start disrespecting you, sometimes you have to look into why they're disrespecting you or why they're agitated or upset. And so I learned how to treat people equally and at least with respect, if anything else. I've actually had people that I've taken to jail thank me for being so nice to them, which is kind of strange, but it's a weird feeling, but it's good to have that happen.
What do you think your most important experience while doing border patrol was?
Important experience as an actual border officer. Um, let's see. I would say processing refugees who were returned from Canada. That back in the early 90s, there was an influx of Pakistanis that would come into the United States and then head to Canada to claim political asylum up there. Canada would interview them and they would send the refugees back to us because they go back to the country they came from. And we would process them there as well. And I got to hear a lot of stories about persecution and hardships that these people endured in the countries that they came from. Not just the typical ones that you see in the media, but just personal hardships that they were enduring. The when it comes to familial problems, one family's got a problem with another family, but processing refugees, I think, was probably one of the more important things that I did. Um, when I was an investigator, I would say a lot of my stuff was chewed up with fraud, and specifically credit card fraud, the onion router stuff, the black web kind of stuff, and tracing that down. That was fun, and I had a lot of fun as an investigator. I really did. Met a lot of interesting people.
Well, doing dark web tour, and because I'm familiar with that, so um when it comes to those investigations, right? What were you investigating? Just drugs? Because there's a lot that goes on the internet, unfortunately.
With me, the cases that I was running across, because I'll be honest with you, being an investigator, it's you're like a detective. Whatever falls from the sky while you're on call, that's what you get. I mean, that's just, if you're the unlucky person to pick up the phone call, it's your thing. I was lucky that I avoided child porn cases. I only wound up with one of those. I could talk about that another time. But the um, for the tour stuff, what what led me into that area was fraud, credit card fraud mostly. There was a lot of it in the bigger cities. Montreal, there was a lot coming down through the border with people from Montreal would have stacks and stacks of credit cards or ATM cards that were actually, they were like uh, Dunkin' Donuts cards and gift cards, but they had turned them into actual ATM cards, and they were taking all of the. They would go to ATMs and draw money out till it wouldn't drop, or they'll buy merchandise from Apple and resell it for half the price so they can just get the cash. And then we found out, we actually ran across a computer. Somebody who had a laptop with them that had all of the information on there. I'm not saying it's the smartest thing in the world to cross an international border with that type of evidence, but it turned into more of a boon for us as investigators than it did for prosecuting them. But it was definitely, the fraud is rampant in this world. It's scary. It really is. I mean, drugs. If that's all it was people doing drugs, it probably wouldn't get as much attention as it does. But you start taking people's money out of their wallets, man, then people get a little upset about it.
Well, I actually interviewed the guy, this guy John Bosiak. He got released from prison like no, not 5 years ago. I feel like I don't know when he got released from prison. I think it was like 10 years ago even. It was at some point recently, a little bit, but he stole $4.5 million in credit card fraud.
Wow.
And so he wasn't just committing fraud like that, because what he would do is he would commit credit card kind of like that, but his scheme was a little bit more complicated than going to an ATM. What he would do is that he would buy, what did he buy? He would get people's information, then he would put it on, he would emboss it onto a card, or if he didn't emboss it onto a card, he would just go to a website, order it on like in a laptop on like eBay to an abandoned house, and then resell it on eBay.
Right.
Or then go to an electronics store. He would just resell it somehow.
Mm-hmm.
But he made 4 million, but eventually the way that he made money in the end was because he started selling the plastic that people could put credit card information onto. So it was interesting for him to tell the story about how the most expensive purchases he made. And interestingly enough, at his trial, there was no witnesses or anybody that testified against him.
Right.
Because there was no victims, technically. He really just stole from the credit card company, because everybody else got their money back. He didn't have to pay any money back,
Mm-hmm.
I don't think. So what did you, with regards to people that I have personally met, like people like that, people that have put the credit card information in the plastic, or are selling the plastic, like, did you do any of those types of investigations?
No, they didn't. We didn't actually have the plastic. We would. A lot of the people that were coming down here were doing they're embossing the cards, or they were just putting the information on the magnetic stripe, especially ATM cards, and they would take it and they would install skimmers down here. We'd find skimmers down south of here at Plattsburgh, New York. We would find skimmers on the gas station pumps. And when it first started up, people were like, "Well, how do they get this technology?" And somebody looked on Amazon and said, you can buy the printer, the imprinter for $15." So CBP actually went out and bought some of these and put them at the ports of entry. So what they would do is if they found somebody with a big stack of cards of some type, I mean, people carry around whatever they want to carry around, their credit cards and stuff. But if they had like a credit card and they would run it through the thing, through the skimmer, and they would read the card and they would see that it's a different number and different access number than what's actually been embossed on the card, then that in New York, the federal side, you had to have like $50,000 to $100,000 worth of fraud to go with it. And since you only had the card numbers and they were Canadian banks, getting information out of the Canadian banks was hard to get. So we would usually turn all those over to the state because that's an access device fraud case, and that's a 5-year penalty. So we caught one guy with 27 cards one night. This was just right before I retired, and the state charged him 27 charges of access fraud device. But it was you get the most bang for your buck, I guess. They look for where it's going to be charged, and most of mine was just that, them just stealing the numbers. They would go to ATMs locally if they were ATM cards, and they'd sit there and draw out as much money as they can until they would pick it out on them. It's that's basically what I would run into. And it's a pretty, I mean, yeah, I gotta hand it, the ingenuity is there. It's not it's, I wouldn't say it's admirable because you're stealing, but it's I admire the ingenuity, you know. And if there was a more honest way for somebody to make money, they would probably do it. But if you really think about it, it is a lot of work to do. Even though you might be sitting behind a computer, there's still a lot of work you've got to put into doing that.
Well, my follow-up question is, when you're doing those types of investigations, the difference between a normal drug dealing investigation or a normal investigation and a website investigation is that you can't arrest up, right? When the Silk Road was a thing, originally the DEA was like, "Oh, we'll just arrest up until we find the admin," and then they realized, wait a minute, everybody's their own person. We can't do this. Everybody's separate. This is a totally different type of investigation.
Exactly.
So, with regards to that, a lot of credit card like forum owners and people like that, when they get arrested, they're usually like Russian citizens, right? So did you ever arrest like the owner of any of these websites?
No, I didn't. I wasn't lucky enough to get into that. The amount of resources it takes to investigate. The cool thing about those type of investigations is it usually doesn't affect just one jurisdiction because it's on the internet. Federally, it's pretty much in everybody's jurisdiction. A U.S. attorney in the middle of Missouri could probably somehow find a way to apply, apply jurisdiction on it. And if we ran across something that was really blowing up on us, of course, we'd have to, as it gets reported up the chain of command to the higher ups, they realize that more resources are needed. So then they bring in places like C3, the Cyber Crime Center with HSI, and I think Secret Service is part of cyber crimes as well now. We would bring in their resources, and they would find like the best fit for us with either other agencies or with other offices that had people with the expertise and the time, because a lot of it's a time. Like this area up here, I can say at the most we had 12 investigators in this area, and that covers 2.5 very large counties of northern New York. And it's a lot, and it's a lot of hills up here. We're talking the Adirondack Mountains. Lake Placid was in my area of responsibility as well, but you're so spread out that you've got other casework going on. At one time, I sat back and I saw I was coming up for case reviews, and I saw they had 28 cases pending, and these are active investigations. And I said, you got to trim something. So if we could pass on that stuff to other people that could help and actually prosecute it better, we would. And it all comes down to resources a lot of times. And I think a lot of investigators will probably tell you the same thing, that if you don't have the resources or the time to put into it, your bosses don't want to spend your time doing it, you find somebody to help. And don't be afraid to ask for help, ever. Anybody.
Well, on a bit of a darker topic in that case. So you said you had done one child porn investigation.
Yes, of my own, yes.
Yes. Okay. So what was it? Like, what was the context? Who was he?
Um, I can't get into real specifics. Um, I won't get dates or times or any of that. But I will say, subject came across the border on a bus destined to New York City, because we're direct line between Montreal and New York City, so it's like a conduit, a artery here. Um, when CBP was looking through one of his electronic devices, his laptops, because of where he was going. His story, a lot of times people's stories don't make sense. They're going down for whatever, but they don't have the means to pay for it. They don't have a return ticket. Something just sparks their interest. So they look at him a little deeper, but they found some unsavory photos on his laptop and got into his cell phone. I wound up seizing all of that seizing that all, or detaining it, I should say, for further investigation. And it turned out that he had child porn on there, and he was coming down here to meet up with teenage girls. He was now to kind of paint the picture here. He was 20. I'll say he was in his early 20s or so, and he would target girls that were 15 or 16. And he had videos on his cell phone of interactions that he had had with them, which were not very nice. Which were just offensive all the way around. So we wound up indicting him, and he showed up at the port one night, and I brought it. We actually had a child exploitation investigator in our office. That was her full-time job. And I didn't want the case to begin with. I mean, I was able to hook the fish. I just didn't want to clean it and fry it. But my boss said, it's good for you to learn this stuff. And it was eye-opening. I will say it was eye-opening. It was scary too. Um, she came up. We did an interview with him. The U.S. attorney authorized arrest, so we arrested the guy, and I had to testify in front of grand jury. Now, if has anybody ever explained how grand jury works with those, with how grand juries actually work?
No, nobody
Okay,
ever does.
okay. A grand jury is usually 23 people. Okay, and they sit down for 18 months. You're assigned to this. They hear a case. The attorneys, the prosecuting attorneys, present their case, and they have to get 16 out of 23 people to agree that a crime occurred and that this person committed the crime. And that's not a guilty verdict. It's just, did a crime occur, and is it possible this person committed a crime? And you have to present the evidence. So I had to go to grand jury with the evidence from the laptop and the cell phone. And you have to, it's just like any kind of evidence. You have to show pictures, you have to describe it. But with the case of child porn, you have to describe it. Now, I wouldn't know how to describe it without being very, I've got a very pedestrian way of describing things. So we actually had to have a gentleman who did that and wrote out a description of the picture that I could read to the grand jury. And you could see the look on their faces of the grand jury. They duck, they put their head down, they shake their head, and you're just reading words. Just words alone describing this stuff is just repulsive. So I got done. It took like 10 minutes. And of course, you ask them, does anybody want to see these photos? Now, how many people in a grand jury you think are going to raise their hand? Hey, I want to look at that. Yeah, yeah, exactly. So they kind of get the point. And we got the indictment, and he got arrested. I'm not sure what happened to it after that because the case was transferred out of my hands to somebody else. So I didn't even want to know about it. But I learned a lot about how our legal system deals with that. Um, and I will say that we have some very good laws out there, very strong laws. And I would say that we're overwhelmed with the amount of work that's there. There is a lot of work out there. There are a lot of people that fall straight into that bad guy category when it comes to that. And I'm not kidding. And I'm not saying because the law is so ambiguous. I'm just saying that these are just straight up violators. And you can't grab them all because you have to prioritize, who's the worst, you know, child porn dealer or child exploiter out there who, I bring them five and they'll say, we'll take this one because there's so much we can do with this versus this person. Because, I mean, yeah, you've got like 1,000 photos, but that's not really what we need. I'm sorry, but that's a lot of bad stuff. So yeah, I didn't like looking at it. It was disturbing when we do child porn warrants, um, and they would be reviewing the evidence. I remember in one case, the person reviewing the evidence um, had the laptop or something on turned on, and there was a video playing, but he had the volume turned all the way up. Well, there were 12 agents standing around. um, we were finishing up the search warrant when all of a sudden you just heard this stuff come out up over this video. And the only thing worse than looking at a child porn, the only thing worse than looking at a child porn video is hearing a child porn video. It is there is no doubt in your mind what you hear, and it's really disturbing. And you heard 12 guys go, "Oh man, turn that off! Oh my gosh, turn that off!" It's crazy. Don't like that stuff. Don't like it.
So ultimately, what did you learn about the mind of people that commit any of these crimes? Whether, like, let's start with the credit card fraud. Like, what did you learn about the commonalities and like what was the motive of people other than the obvious of money? But like,
Right.
what was the type of person that's committing credit card fraud?
The credit card fraud are, well, they look at it as a victimless crime because the people with the credit cards, they got, like you said, they got their money back or they got a refund. Some of them actually had morals. One gentleman, they would never take uh, debit card information. They would only take credit card information because he says, if I took a debit card, it would be like me taking your wallet and pulling the money out of it. With a credit card, it's just the credit card company. The people are going to get their money back. And that's how they would justify it. And I don't know. I mean, I understand their justification. I really do. I understand it. I just don't know if they were trying to. A lot of them looked at it as it's something we do and we're entitled to do it. We got a lot of attitude from some of them. But one guy said, this is how he lives. This is how he makes his money. This is how he pays his rent. That's how he buys his food. He might buy some sneakers and not sell them. He'll actually keep them, or buy that laptop, but keep the laptop instead of reselling it. So yeah, it was interesting. That's pretty much there. It's more of a, you know, most of them, it was a necessity. They needed it to survive. And then but then it got kind of carried away and they got bigger and bigger. And they're like, wow, we're not just surviving, we're thriving now, you know? And, it's, it's out there. It's everywhere. I just think, this electronic age that we're in, that we're only scratching the surface as far as age wise goes, but as far as technological advances goes, I mean, this type of stuff's everywhere. You gotta. I mean, I'm happy to have cash in my wallet versus a card most of the time because at least I know I can go in and I can buy dinner with that cash, and not worry about my card being hacked at some point in time or so on the Tor network. but they do it out of necessity. I think the child porn. I wouldn't even begin to get into why they do that, but most of them, uh, yeah, all but one talked, and I mean they talked. They couldn't read the Miranda rights to them fast enough because as soon as you walk in there with a warrant, the stuff just starts. They just like they've got to get it out. It's like this demon they've been holding on for so long, and it's good. I mean that's fantastic, but it just there's a lot of it out there, and people need to be cognizant of what their children do. And I'm talking all age children. What are you barking at? Sorry, I'm sorry about that. Okay, Moki, stop. Stop it. I'm sorry. There's a truck backing up and it does the beeping sound, and she hates that beeping sound. She's going to let them know what her displeasure is. Okay, sorry.
No, you're good. So I was just gonna say that with the, that and the fact that they're talking. So are the words that they're saying justifications? Like, are they just justifying everything that they've done? Or they're like, I'm so sorry, or are they like what are the words? What are they trying to get out there?
They're when you have somebody in that situation, and you have to be careful, just like with any crime. You you get the Miranda read to them, and you make sure it's read and documented that they know what you're saying. They waive their rights to talk to you, um, and understand that they have to tell the truth. That's the other thing. It has to be the truth. They just start saying, "What are we going to find? Like, what are we going to find in the bathroom, or what are we going to find in the living room?" And they'll just start telling you what's on it. What is on that CD? What is on that laptop? And they know. I mean, it's in there. It's in their mind, and it's more factual. But you know that the reason they're doing it is it's some people call it a coming to Jesus moment, where hey, it's up. Time is up. You've got to start at least telling people what's going on, and they're confessing what's going on, and it usually avoids trial. I don't think any of them ever went to trial. They were always just the evidence was too overwhelming, and the most I ever saw a one person get was a guy named Ryan Staples. You can even look that up on Google. He was out of northern New York here, and he got 90 years, and he pled guilty straight up to all the charges. There was no plea bargain and the plea bargain was you have to plead guilty to everything, and he did. He pled guilty to everything, and he was an extraordinary case. I wasn't the case agent on it, but um, I was there for the search warrant. I was there where I'm myself and my partner were the ones that took him to jail the first time, and he's one of the ones that thanked us for treating him so nicely. And I think he knew what we were there for. Well, he knew what we were there for. He had that stare where he was just staring off in the distance the whole time we were walking around him. He just sat on the couch staring into the wall like 1,000 yards through, and because I think a lot of things were going through his mind. But when we got him to the jail, he thanked us for treating him nice and not being mean to him or anything. Okay, I'm not. It's kind of funny how they do that. It's like as if I was just the transporting officer. I was a discovery officer for evidence, and I was one of the searching officers. And but through all of that, that's what crosses his mind is how well he's going to be treated. So yeah, there's I don't know. Humans are different, but like I said, I guess because we treated him with respect all the way back to the beginning.
What do you think your biggest regret was as an investigator?
My biggest regret is not working. There's actually, I would say two of them. not working on the southern border office, and not working a large field office, large city like Atlanta, Phoenix, Arizona, LA, Philadelphia, any of the larger cities, larger metropolitan cities, because the exposure you get with Homeland Security investigations, there are 31 different types of cases that you can investigate, or they're categorized. And being up here on the northern border, you're limited. You're very limited on what you did. The last 5 or 6 years, my designation was um, antiquities smuggling, and I investigated quite a few antiquities smuggling cases, uh, and those were very interesting. Those were very Maltese Falcon kind of stuff that you read, and you read books about this type of stuff, about these antiquities being moved around the world. They just flow right underneath your noses, and they sent me to school for that, and that was fun. But if I had been in a bigger office, I probably would have been exposed to a lot more stuff like that. That was more interesting. The Tor network. Um, the fraud that I investigated was I did a lot of mail fraud investigation with the Postal Service, and we had one that we had documented $250 million worth of fraud off of one server, and that was in Canada, because that's where they all originated out of, was Canada. So we're yeah, not working the southern border, and not working a large metropolitan area, because I think that would have given me a lot of fun cases to work on, and a huge exposure to possible promotions, and meeting a lot of interesting people, of which I did meet over 33 years. I met a lot.
What do you think your biggest accomplishment was as an investigator?
Biggest accomplishment, when I when they created Department of Homeland Security, and I became a field agent mixed in with the U.S. Customs agents, I was told that the officer I was working for, he was an extremely nice man. He said, I've got 9 agents in here chasing dope all around the North Country. I don't need other people chasing it. I need somebody to get into customs. I need to get into the port of entry, find customs fraud, because there's millions of dollars worth of fraud going on all over the place with with U.S. customs laws. I said, okay, so I'll do that. So all this time, everybody was putting these oddball cases on me here and there, and just like, hey, we're the ones dealing with the dope. We're the ones dealing with the dope. The last case I had duty for a week, and none of the guys in my office would take the duty for me. And I'm like close to retirement. I mean, really close. And I was like, okay, thanks a lot, guys. I appreciate that. So there was a seizure. I wound up, over a period of time, we were able to track this truck coming down that had um, traps hidden in it, and it took about 5 days, but we wound up stopping it going into Canada with 160 kilos of cocaine. So I'm sitting here thinking, all right, I'm looking at a $10 million worth of cocaine that I just really, it, I mean, it's not, stuff like that just doesn't run around in large packages. It's small packages that are put together in big loads. Um, so I'm looking at that going, so here's the agent that they said they don't need anybody else chasing dope. And I got the largest narcotic seizure in history in this area. And I said, and then I retired. I was like, I'm done. I'm done with it all. I didn't want to get into the investigation of going upwards. So I handed it to my supervisor. And he said, listen, you got to write a memo for this, or you got to write this, and you got to help with that. And I said, no, I don't. I shut the case file. I took it into my supervisor. I said, you got to give this to somebody, because I am not doing this. I got too many things on my mind. I mean, I was walking out the door. I mean, I was literally leaving, and I was still able to put this together and get the enforcement action done. But as far as the investigation on the people that went upwards, I I didn't have the time, and I didn't have the heart to put into it. And they turned it over to a good friend of mine, who we're on like a 5-way thread with a bunch of other retired officers, and we're always sending texts back and forth. And I trusted him implicitly to do that, because I had worked with him in other offices, and he handled it. I think the truck driver himself got 10 years, and that was a part of it, as part of a bargain, I think. But he got 10 years, and he had already served 5, waiting for that sentencing anyway. So he made out pretty well on that deal, I believe. But that, yeah, to end my career for somebody that was told, I don't need anybody else to do that. Yeah, I need you to go over and chase X, Y, and Z and be the number cruncher person. I'm like, okay, I can do that. Didn't like doing it. I'd rather be out running around, tailing people and following stuff, and serving subpoenas and warrants and all that good stuff. That was fun. There's a lot of fun to it. It really is. And so that was interesting. Well, since that was the one thing I was proud of, is that last case, that I was able to get a huge enforcement action that everybody denied me forever. They'd always told me, you come across something with drugs at the port, you got to turn it over to us. That's fine. That's fine. But I happened to be on duty, because nobody wanted to take my duty calls. Nobody wanted to deal with it. I'm like, okay, we did it.
Throughout your career, what did you learn about drug dealers? Like, what did you learn about the type of person that sells drugs?
I would say there's a couple of different types of people. There are drug dealers who do it out of necessity. They become part of the chain, because they're users. The only way they can keep up with their use is to sell. So their life revolves completely around the movement of the drugs themselves. Those poor souls have an addiction that is just, I I I feel sorry for them at that point. I don't feel sorry for them violating the law and getting in trouble for it. I feel sorry for them as the underlying cause. And then you have the drug dealers that are just about the money, the prestige. And we arrested, I remember arresting this person he was at the border one time, and he had quite a bit of drugs on him, bringing him down south. And he said, you understand, man, I got to feed my kids. I said, so you're going to poison my kids to feed your kids? No, that don't work. That doesn't fly in my mind. That's a justification I can't deal with. The addicts that we would run across that were part of the mechanism, usually working for people that were just feeding their kids, those people I really feel for. And it's unfortunate that at the federal level, you have to depend upon the state and locals for getting people help. And like with anything, they have to want the help first. And unfortunately, going to jail is usually a wake-up call for somebody. So that's the two type of people that I learned, that's you're either part of the machine or you're running the machine. And either way, it's bad. But I have more feelings, just from uh, just from my faith. I have more feelings and care for the person who's doing it, because they're just feeding that addiction. It's the whole reason they're doing what they're doing. And you can see it over and over and over again. And it's very sad.
What advice do you have for young people? That's the last question I'm going to ask, and then we'll stop recording and we'll talk after the show. But what advice do you have for young people?
For young
Actually,
people,
I have 2 more questions. I have two more questions.
That's fine.
It's just that and then one other. So
Okay. For young people looking to get into the job, or just young people in
at
general,
large,
be honest. Be honest with everybody. I don't mean brutal 100% candor about everything, but just be honest with people. If you are honest with people, you will be surprised just how much honesty you'll get back. You'll make more friends that way. You'll stay out of trouble, hopefully. And keep in mind that law enforcement officers are people. They have homes that they go home to. They're only at work for 8 hours a day. In my case, it was 10 plus, but 8 hours a day. They go home. They've got families. You probably go to school with uh, their children or their mothers and fathers you've worked with. Just always keep in mind that we're all humans. We're all on this earth together, and we all have a job to do. And I try to instill that into my kids as they go, oh, there's a cop, you better slow down. I said, okay, if I'm speeding and I get a ticket, that's fine, but don't look at them as an enemy. They're doing a job that, by the way, your tax money is paying for. So quit. Would you rather than be doing their job or be sleeping? That's the other side of it. But yeah, just be honest. Young people is to be honest, because I think honesty goes a long way in this world right now, and we need that.
um, what do you think the most important lesson that you learned throughout your entire career was?
Oh, the lesson that I learned. Pay attention to your family. Pay attention to your family. Always your family. Don't forget to, if you're lucky enough to have a mother and father, don't ever forget to hug them. Tell them you love them every now and then. Um, do things for them. With my sons, I realized just how much time. When I retired, they were still just starting high school. So I remembered when I was in high school, my parents were both working. And I said, you know how much I would love to have had both my parents at home while I was in high school? And the fact that I'm with them now, I am I'm very sorry that I missed so much of their life beforehand. But you can ask them now. I'm just obnoxiously up in their stuff all the time now. It's just they just drive me crazy as it is. Whoop, it went away. There it goes. Um, yeah, family. Always stay around family. Family's going to be your mainstay. Your family's pretty tight, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
at
you
least
got your.
at least the close part of my family.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
Well, the ones that are close, stay close to them. Um, Even if you move far away, always try and feel like you're right there with them, or they're right there with you. Always be inviting. It's ignoring family can really hurt a lot of people, and I saw it hurt a lot of people over the years when they put too much important impotence into that 8 to 10 hours a day that they're gone, and they're not paying attention to the other 12 or 14 hours that they're at home. So they should pay more attention to that. That's all.
all right. Well, thank you for coming on. I'm going to stop the recording and we'll talk after the show. Any final words, comments?
No, peace.
All right. 3, 2, 1.